In this segment, we're going to go through the ultra boiler components. In the heat exchanger compartment, we have a lot of components here. First, we have a 16-pin connector. This transfers the wiring from the U-control down into the heat exchanger compartment. Out of this 16-pin connector, we come across and we put a signal cable to the supply sensor on the block. This is called a block sensor. It's a dry sensor. You do not have to drain the boiler if you need to change the sensor out. Right next to that is the supply piping, leaving the top portion of the heat exchanger. Here we have the tridicator temperature and pressure cords. Here we have another plug-in connector. This is a 120 volt connection that comes down to energize the blower motor. This is a variable speed blower motor. We send a AC current to it. It's converted to a DC current so we can control the RPM of the blower motor. We can go from 20% input to 100% input on the boiler. This is the signal cable coming from the control down to communicate with the blower motor. As you can see here, all of the cables are marked with the specific function that they do. From blower signal to gas valve, everything is marked. This is a negative pressure gas valve. Based on the revolutions of the blower motor, gas-air mixture is drawn through, mixed, and then injected into the burner. This is a silencer tube. This draws the air from the compartment up through the venturi into the combustion blower and injects it into the burner. We have a shutoff valve on the gas line with a flexible connector on all the boilers. Over here we have the exhaust sensor. This plugs directly into the stainless steel exhaust port going up the side of the heat exchanger. This is the return sensor. This also screws directly into the block. You do not have to drain the boiler to change this sensor either. Back here is the sticker for the boiler. Tells you the size, everything about the boiler, the input rates, the output rates. The condensate line comes off of the lower portion of the exhaust, comes up, out, and through the cabinet. All the material that you see here, including the plastic fitting, are included with the boiler. The return piping is on the other side of the boiler right here. Comes standard with a boiler drain, already attached from the factory. Come up this side, there's a ground cable that's attached to the igniter. The igniter mounts directly into the front of the boiler with two Phillips head screws. The ignition cable plugs directly into the igniter. This cable goes up to the control, the spark comes down, and then we send a flame signal back up through this cable, which is displayed on the U-control screen. That's a tour of the heat exchanger compartment of an Ultra boiler. Okay, up top here on the Ultra, we're going to remove the control pod. And here's the display. The display has the temperature and pressure gauge. Your window here, 3.5-inch LCD screen, and it'll give you all the information that the boiler will display. You know your push-button keypad, up, down, left, right, and enter. This will swing down. Under here we have the U-control. The U-control has the connection for the igniter. Here's your switch, backside of your on-off switch. Over here we have a low voltage fuse protection and line voltage fuse protection on the U-control that's built into all the controls. Just behind the backside of the switch, your on-off switch is right here, located here. There are several locations for electrical connections. There's 6 along the top, 2 down each side, and another 6 along the back of the boiler. In addition to that, we have on the back of the boiler, we have the supply tapping, the return tapping, and the gas line. We also have the fresh air inlet and the exhaust port. Now, on all of these connections back here, make sure you check the manual. Some of these can be reduced, some of these have to be increased. Depending on the size of the boiler you're installing, you may be able to reduce the vent piping, but you may have to increase the boiler piping. So, know what size boiler you're installing, double check it against the manual to see if you have to increase the supply and return piping or if you can decrease the exhaust piping, which will save in the cost of your exhausting. But we need to make sure the flow rate through the boiler is correct. Double check the manual to make sure that this is correct. And that's the components on the Ultra boiler from top to bottom.